Xiaomi's Xring has finally got a launch date with a teaser poster indicating the in-house system on chip boasts an impressive, get this, 19 billion transistors and is manufactured using second generation 3 nanometer process from, you guessed it, TSMC, which we'll get into later. This was initially revealed by Xiaomi CEO Li Jun, who did not specify the launch date at that time, but we do have a launch date right now. Now, this Xring 01 is expected to be mass produced using the second generation. We did that by TSMC and will compete directly. We're about to show the benchmark results with the Apple A19 Bionic, the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite, in the Dimensity 9400. Now, here's what the poster looks like. This is the social media poster that they had put out. Now, they are going to officially unveil this on May the 22nd. Unlike the Snapdragon 8 Elite, the Xring 01 will not incorporate any in-house cores. So the Snapdragon 8 Elite takes the ARM design, CPU design. And these are all patents, right? Because ARM technically owns the patent rights to the CPU architecture that we use in our phones today. However, Snapdragon's really risen to the top because they've actually implemented their own Orion cores into the ARM's design. The custom cores allow for more integration of what you're trying to do. As far as Qualcomm, you can integrate more features and stuff like that into your phone. You can fine tune it more, right? Now, this new Xiaomi CPU will not integrate any in-house cores, but they will integrate their own cores, kind of like how Qualcomm does with their Orion cores. They will incorporate their own cores in the future, basically adding upon the cores that are already there with the ARM architecture. It achieves a very impressive Geekbench score. Now, this will be a 10-core cluster. So this will be, and what is it? Deca-core, I guess. Octa-core would be 8. So this will be a Deca-core. Let's see. It was first rumored that they would manufacture this on a 4 nanometer process, but I'm glad they chose the 3 nanometer process because that allows them to stay on par with the very latest and greatest CPUs, mobile device CPUs in the industry, because the Snapdragon 8 Elite is on a 3 nanometer node. The Apple A19 Bionic chip, Apple's CPU, is on a 3 nanometer node. The MediaTek Dimensity 9400 is on a 3 nanometer. So they wanted to stay right up there with the very best in the world. And it looks like they put together a pretty damn good CPU. This thing is only 4% slower than the Snapdragon 8 Elite. 4% slower than the Snapdragon 8 Elite. So it's basically neck and neck with the very best CPU that you can find on the market. So check this out. Now, it scored. So there were multiple tests. So they ran, I think, 3 tests, and I got 2 of them listed down here. The first test, they scored a 2709 in single core and in 8125 in multi-core score. But then they had a even better one, scoring they topped out at a 3119 single core and a 9673 multi-core score. Those are right on par. Like I said, for just a few numbers shy of what the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite scored. As you know, the 8 Elite from Qualcomm, Apple has a better single core score, but the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite beats the Apple A19 Bionic CPU in multi-core score. I think this falls just shy of both of those, so this would technically be the third best and or fastest CPU benchmark wise for mobile devices. Now, I don't know off the top of my head what the Dimensity 9400 or 9400 plus scored, but look, I mean, all 4 of these CPUs from MediaTek, from Qualcomm, from Apple, and now from Xiaomi, they are right there in performance. So this being Xiaomi's very first CPU is mind-blowing. Just how they put this together, Nobody expected them to score anywhere near this. And quite frankly, they had to. If you're going to enter the market, they are going to introduce this into a next year's flagship. Now, I say next year's, which I think it's going to come out later this year. So technically, this year's flagship here in maybe, I think, November, December. They're going to put this in the Xiaomi 15 Pro. They're going to throw this in everything here in the near future. They're going to put this in tablets, mobile devices, and phones. And I even heard that they're going to make a special edition for their cars. If y'all have never seen a Xiaomi electric vehicle, they are freaking awesome. Here are the specs. So when you look down here, was the test was conducted on May 19th. Hell, that was this morning. Let's see here. Operating system Android 15. And here's the model number. Name, ARM V8, 1 processor, 10 cores. Here we go. You have 2 cores at 1.8 gigs, 2 cores at 1.89 gigs, 4 cores at 3.4 gigs, and 2 cores at 3.9 gigahertz. They're eventually going to roll into no outside CPUs, everything in-house. Now, why that has Qualcomm concerned, right? I'm not going to say scared or shook, but concerned, is because think of the landscape. Think of the landscape, right? So, and it looks like Xiaomi is also going to supply or have the option to supply other Chinese phone manufacturers, meaning Huawei. Huawei is going to purchase CPUs from Xiaomi and put them in their phones. Don't know about Oppo. Don't know about OnePlus, but let's get into it. So if Xiaomi supplies their own CPUs and Huawei CPUs, Apple uses their own CPUs, Samsung, Lord knows, God almighty, Lord knows, Samsung would love to have their Exynos CPUs powering each and every Samsung device on this planet. In a perfect world, each and every Samsung device would have an Exynos CPU. Let's not get it twisted. They would love to have that happen, and they are not giving up the fight. They've had a lot of bad luck lately. Their foundry department, where they actually manufacture their Exynos CPUs, been real hit or miss. They had a decent one. Was it the 2400, Exynos 2400? 2500? Not so much. But they're going all in on the 2600. So next year's Exynos CPU. Now, here's what will really get Qualcomm's attention. If Samsung can get their shit together when it comes to manufacturing these CPUs, and let's say they actually got a hit with this 2600, next year's flagship Exynos CPU from Samsung. Let's say, hey, it's a good one, right? A rather decent one. And they go all in. I don't know Samsung's current contract with Qualcomm, but if all they need is maybe 1 or 2 generations of their Exynos CPUs, meaning they have a good efficiency, meaning, and it has decent fanfare, right? They don't overheat, and you have really decent scores. I'm not talking about chart-topping scores like these, but let's just say they have a really good performing flagship CPU, and let's say they turn them out 2 years in a row. Well, I can guarantee you the Qualcomm contract with Samsung to supply CPUs probably going to be up right around that time, because how they do it is roughly in 3 to 4, no more than maybe 5 years, because 5 years in the tech world is a lifetime. So Samsung will sign contracts 3-4 years with Qualcomm to supply CPUs. Well, if Samsung has two good years of producing CPUs, they're not going to sign another Qualcomm contract, right? They're going to just go all in on their own CPUs, supplying your Samsung Galaxy S27, S28, everything moving forward. So where does that put Qualcomm? Xiaomi's going to have their own CPUs. Huawei's going to have the Xiaomi CPUs. Apple's got the A19, their own CPUs. Samsung would you be using their own CPUs. Who's going to use Qualcomm? Now, Oppo is the other major manufacturer, and they have a number of phone manufacturers. That's a parent company, right? They got OnePlus. They have Oppo, their own phones. They have Realme. They have Poco, right? All those Chinese phones. What do they do? Is it possible Oppo, the parent company of OnePlus, is it they might go with Xiaomi if they have a couple good years of producing really good CPUs, real strong CPUs? Could Oppo sign contract with Xiaomi to get these Xrings in the OnePlus devices? Could OnePlus go with MediaTek to supply CPUs? Now I say that because Qualcomm CPUs are going to be 30% more expensive next year. A report just came out yesterday. The new Snapdragon Elite 2 and Elite 3 here in the future are going to be 30% more expensive. So the costs continually go up. At what point, what if Xiaomi comes in and says, hey, Oppo, instead of using Qualcomm, and you're Chinese based as well, why don't you stay with a Chinese company? We'll supply you with our Xring CPUs and you'll save, we're going to be 42% cheaper than Qualcomm. Oppo may not have a chance. Those are huge savings that they desperately do not want to pass on to the consumer, because as these prices rise for these phones, sales drop. I mean, it just is what it is. Where does Qualcomm go? They may be pushed out of the mobile phone market because they don't manufacture a phone. They just manufacture a CPU. Now, it's a freaking badass CPU, but all these phone companies want to use their own CPUs. Now, I think Qualcomm is quietly planning for this. Now, if you run any company, whether it's small, right, you're sole proprietorship, you have a small LLC, or you're on the Fortune 500 list, you're always planning for the future. You're always looking at the landscape. You're trying to predict where business is going. I think Qualcomm sees this scenario and would make a graceful exit to computers, laptops, and electric vehicles. So Qualcomm, I saw a report last week saying that they're going all in on their laptop division. Now, those sales aren't really that strong, but they could dominate. Intel is basically really struggling. They're struggling just to keep their head above water, so they may go under. AMD is always going to be there, but you would always like to have two major competitors. Now, Qualcomm entered the ARM market, the x86 market, the CPU market for laptops last year, right? I didn't really have the best experience. Actually, I take that back. I got a Samsung Galaxy Edge, Samsung Galaxy Book 4 Edge. It was working fine for about 12 hours and it just stopped working. It just wouldn't turn on, right? I had a Qualcomm ARM base, but I don't think it was necessarily, well, maybe it was due to that. I have no idea. But I've had an HP OmniBook X, phenomenal. Battery life's badass. So they're on the right track. And they're going to enter the car market as well. So they've opened up, well, they've had a new division for their EVs, but that's right up their alley, right? If they can sign huge deals with all these, with it's just like signing big deals with these phone companies. They sign big deals to manufacture and produce ECUs for automotives. They could sign a deal with Ford. They could sign a deal with Chevrolet. They could sign a deal with Ferrari. They could sign a deal with a bunch of car manufacturers. And actually, that might be more lucrative for Qualcomm moving into the EV space. I think they're quietly, secretly planning for that or something like that, because they've just invested I think it was $1 or $2 billion in their EV division, where they make electronic control units for vehicles. And they also heavily invested in their x86 division. So I think the groundwork is there for Qualcomm to kind of get pushed out of the mobile phone division of CPUs. It sucks. I really like their CPUs. Now, I guess I've had a lot of good experiences with the CPUs, but It is what it is. That's just how the market goes. If the prices continually go up, then your customer, if you're Qualcomm, your customer, which is Xiaomi, which is Samsung, which is how Google even dropped them. Google's doing. How could I forget Google? They're manufacturing, designing their own CPUs. So everybody wants to do that, make their own CPUs, and I don't see Ford, I don't see Chevy, I don't see Ferrari manufacturing their own CPUs. They don't know what they're doing when it comes to that. But that's right up Qualcomm's alley. In fact, you can already find them in some EVs right now. So I think that's going to be their market. And don't doubt the AI market, data centers. I know it's kind of boring. Data center CPU. Well, the longer we go, the more data centers are being put up, the more AI data centers are being put up. And there is huge, big business in data centers moving forward. They're building them all around the world. So I don't think Qualcomm will be squashed, meaning out of business. I think they're just going to have to rearrange how they go about business and get into a different industry. Xiaomi's new CPU, it's been rumored to be in the works for a while. I think for about a month or so, more than that, maybe a few months, right? Um, and it's interesting how Xiaomi got to this point. And I want to cast some possible aspersions upon Qualcomm and Snapdragon. Now, let me pull up some recent news that we will tie into this real quick, um, because it does entail. Sorry, I'm doing this on the fly. Should have had this already up. Let's see here. That's what it is called, Qualcomm Xring 01. Now, I'm assuming that's good. The Xring is going to be the name of their new CPU, and the 01 is obviously the first edition, and I'm sure the next year's CPU is going to be the Xiaomi Xring 02. The year after that, 03, 04, 05. So they're going to give it a numbering system, so we'll be able to tell which is which. The the United States has a little bit to play. Well, should I say, probably has a lot to play in Xiaomi's efforts of putting together a CPU. Now, there's some questions, or at least one big question that I have. The new sanctions on China, the new tariffs put on China. Xiaomi is a Chinese-based company. And the more the United States wants to distance itself from China, everything China made, not necessarily China made, but you saw how the United States did Huawei back in the first Trump administration, basically outcasted them and would not allow Huawei to sell and or promote any products within the United States. And if any company did business with Huawei, they would punish you as well. So that's why Huawei is operating currently everywhere in the world except the United States. And Huawei has their own proprietary operating system. It just does not have the Google Play Store on it. Now, it's interesting because it's real easy to install the Google Play Store. So it's Android is, and this is what Xiaomi is doing with their phones. So they're not only bringing a new CPU to the market for their phones, they're also going to ditch Google here in the near future. Probably within 1 to 2 years, the Xiaomi phones within the US, depending on what the future holds, we don't know. They may or may not dump the Google Play Store, but it looks like they are. So that's what I'm kind of thinking. For all the phones sold in the US, they may add the Google Play Store, but everywhere else in the world, basically 99% of their phones are going to have, that are sold globally, are not going to include the Google Play Store. And Android is an open source project. So they can basically download the source code, AOSP, and make a few modifications and just exclude the Google Play Store and include their own App Store. But you can go get a Huawei phone right now that does not have the Google Play Store on it, and you can sideload APKs. APKs are the file names of the applications. You can sideload APKs onto a Huawei phone. You can actually install the Google Play Store on a Huawei phone. It just doesn't have it out the box. And I think Xiaomi's headed in that direction, right? Now, getting into the CPU, it's interesting because they've kind of were forced to do this. Now, they attempted to make their own CPU about 10 years ago. It was a huge flop. They put it together, and it basically performed so bad that I believe they put it in one or two phones, but it went nowhere. Performance was far from whatever the best performing mobile CPUs were 10 years ago. Wouldn't even close. And huge flop. And they basically ditched it, and we're riding on Qualcomm's back, right? So all Xiaomi phones up until now have had a Qualcomm chip. And I think one or two maybe had a MediaTek, but majority have Qualcomm chips, which is a United States-based company based in San Diego. Now, the Trump administration and or the United States are putting pressure on Qualcomm to cut ties with the Chinese manufacturers, which is not good for Qualcomm because that's business. Xiaomi is paying Qualcomm to use their CPUs. They're buying those CPUs from them. Make no mistake about it. All these major phone manufacturers want to own and operate, manufacture, produce their own CPUs. Just like Apple. Apple has the quintessential footprint for how to bring a mobile device to the market where it's vertical integration, right? I'm talking about the heart and soul of a device, your operating system, your CPU and GPU all integrated together, and your modem. If you can manufacture and produce all three of those, meaning you own all of, like Apple does, right? Apple iOS, Apple CPU, the Bionic chip, and then now they have their new Apple C1 modem, integrating everything. Because if you use your own CPU, if you use your own parts, you save yourself, you save your company money because it saves you from going out and sourcing parts from a Qualcomm, right? They're going to charge you more, right? Because you're the customer. When you can produce everything in-house, you save money, you maximize your profit. So